The Forbidden Scroll. What if I told you there's a scroll that was never meant to be read by man? A document so ancient, so dangerous, that it was sealed with 7 spiritual marks and buried beneath the earth. Far from human hands, far from the voices of heaven. A scroll not written in ink but in fire. Fire that doesn't consume, but remembers. This is not a text of doctrine. It is a confession. A silent testimony buried in the shadow of centuries. The testimony of the morning star, of Lucifer. But this isn't the story of rebellion born from pride, as we've so often been told. It's the story of a question left unanswered, of a silence that shook the heavens, of a voice that once sang among the angels, only to be silenced, not by wrath, but by abandonment. According to this forgotten scroll, Lucifer did not fall for power. He fell for daring to ask why, and no one answered. Known in mystical writings as the Scroll of the Son of Dawn, this manuscript doesn't rest in any library. It is not quoted in temples. It is not taught in Bible schools. It is whispered about, in fragments attributed to Solomon, in hidden pages of the Zohar, in the voices of exiles who still remember what history tried to bury. Legends say it was found sealed within a cave beneath the ancient Tigris River, in a place no human hand could ever have carved. And inside, they say, lies the most dangerous story ever told. Lucifer's version of creation, of Eden, and of the fall. Not his fall, but ours. What if Eden wasn't a paradise lost, but a stage built to test something greater than man? What if the story didn't begin with a serpent, but with an angel who loved too deeply and asked the question no one else dared speak? Today, we open this forbidden scroll, not to glorify the fall, but to understand the fracture. Not to justify the darkness, but to uncover the wound. Because perhaps, what heaven feared most was not rebellion, but memory. 2. Eden through the eyes of Lucifer. The stories we were taught speak of Eden as a perfect garden, lush trees, crystal rivers, an innocent couple, and a divine command. A peaceful scene shattered by a rebellious serpent. But what if that's not the whole truth? What if the garden wasn't born out of joy, but out of a fracture in heaven? The scroll of the morning star doesn't begin with wrath or judgment. It begins with a disquieting line. I saw the light before the stars were born. I was called to sing. But when I asked why, the answer was silence. For Lucifer, that silence was the first crack in celestial harmony. He did not deny it. He felt it. He did not blaspheme. He questioned. And it was then that he witnessed Eden take form. He does not describe Eden as a celebration of creation, but as a weight. It was forged with burden, he writes. Trees mimicking constellations, rivers humming songs only angels once knew. It was beautiful, yes, but strangely artificial, as if everything had been arranged with mathematical precision, but without a soul. And at the center, a new being, fragile, blind, flesh-born. They called him Image, Adam. He didn't understand what he was given, yet he was granted dominion. Lucifer watched him awaken, watched him open his eyes, and in that moment, the heavens did not tremble with fear, but with anticipation. I saw a man breathe, Lucifer writes, and in his breath was something older than light itself. He did not look upon him with hatred, but with awe. He approached, not to destroy, but to understand. The man smiled at him. He had no idea who stood before him. He knew nothing of thrones or celestial choirs, but within him, there was something that echoed eternity, and it was then that Lucifer realized something he was never told, something that was neither light nor shadow, but destiny. I feared him and I loved him, he confesses, because what he saw in Adam was not power, it was potential, and in that potential, the beginning of the end. To Lucifer, that moment was not a fall, but a realization. Eden was not a paradise. It was a stage, a mirror, and what that mirror reflected was his own image, distorted in flesh. And in the heart of this perfect garden, discomfort was born. For Lucifer, the brightest of angels, began to ask the question, why was dust given what light had never received? 3. The creation of Eve and the awakening of the garden. If Adam was a mystery, Eve was fire. Lucifer writes that he didn't understand the purpose of Eden when he saw the man, but when he saw the woman. In her, he didn't just see flesh, he saw echo, not merely matter, but melody. Eve was not shaped from clay, the scroll claims, but born from the side of the one who slept, not as an appendage, but as the question made flesh. The question, writes Lucifer, that had not yet been spoken aloud, but which the entire universe was waiting to hear. Her soul, he continues, burned brighter than Adam's, because she was not simply continuation, she was resonance. The harmony of two songs, one of celestial origin, and the other of a nostalgia that had no name yet. Lucifer watched her open her eyes, and in that instant, the garden reacted. The trees shifted ever so slightly, the wind held its breath, and a shadow crossed the throne. It wasn't rebellion. It was anticipation. Something had changed. Someone had arrived. She was not ignorant, writes Lucifer. She was restrained. She did not fear, but neither did she rush. She walked with the quiet awareness of one who has not yet remembered who she is. It was then that Lucifer approached, not as a tempter, but as a witness, not to twist her will, but to listen to it. I saw her beneath the branches of destiny, he writes, and I spoke to her, not with deception, but with sorrow. I asked her why she feared to know. She answered with a phrase no angel had ever heard. They told me not to touch. And I replied, then why does it call to you? She hesitated, but in her hesitation something trembled in the core of Eden. Because in her silence, Eve formed the question that would change everything. Why create a door and forbid it to be opened? What lies on the other side? She was not afraid of me, Lucifer writes. She listened, and when I spoke of the stars, her eyes reflected them. There was no trickery, he insists, no lie. What he offered was not death, but vision, not condemnation, but clarity. The fruit, he says, does not kill, it reveals, and with revelation comes pain, but also freedom. Eve was not pushed. She walked, she listened, she felt, and she chose. Because Eden, it seems, was never a paradise. It was a question, and she was the first to dare to answer it. And when she touched the fruit, the garden did not scream, it listened. Because perhaps, in that moment, the fall did not begin. It was the awakening. 4. The conversation with the serpent. Since ancient times, the serpent has been a symbol of deceit, of temptation, of the fall. But what if the serpent never lied? What if she wasn't an enemy, but an echo, a mirror, a whisper searching for meaning? Visual backdrop, the serpent in slow motion, gliding gracefully, elegant, not aggressive. The music is tense but mystical, not threatening. Lucifer writes something that shatters every traditional teaching. The serpent did not come to me. I did not enter her. She came on her own. She was already there. She approached the tree, not with malice, but with hunger. Hunger for understanding. It wasn't possession. It was a conversation. A meeting of two hidden desires. The serpent's desire to understand, and Lucifer's desire to be heard. I gave her language, he says. I gave her the question. And in that act, the serpent was not cursed. She became a messenger. Not of deceit, but of the restlessness heaven refused to answer. The serpent did not bite. She did not strike. She spoke. She became, according to the scroll, the channel for a doubt that already hung in the air, a tension that hummed through Eden like a song waiting to be sung. Lucifer does not deny his involvement, but he insists. I did not speak to tempt. I spoke to understand. And when Eve approached, he didn't lure her. He reminded her of something she already suspected. Why place a door and forbid it to be opened? Eve was not naive, nor was she rebellious. She was aware enough to listen, to question, to decide. And in her decision, the garden did not erupt in fire. It trembled as if something ancient had been awakened. The leaves curled, the wind stilled, the river held its breath, Lucifer writes. It was not punishment, it was reaction. The universe, like a body remembering, responded to the crossing of a threshold. And when Adam ate as well, it was not betrayal, it was pilgrimage. The scroll declares, that moment was not a fall. It was passage, crossing, awakening. Eden was not desecrated, Lucifer writes. It was understood for the first time. But the story did not end there, because what awakened was not only in humanity, it awakened in heaven. And the first darkness did not fall upon Adam or Eve. It fell upon Lucifer. 5. The moment of the fruit and the fracture of silence. In the traditional narrative, the fall commences with humanity's act of disobedience, the consumption of the forbidden fruit, which irrevocably shatters Eden. However, the forbidden scroll presents an alternative account. The fall, according to this text, did not transpire on earth. It was not a punitive measure, but an act of abandonment. Lucifer's writings state, "When Eve consumed the fruit, the garden did not condemn. It trembled, as if a silent, ancient divine mechanism had begun to stir. And when Adam replicated this act, a revelation occurred, not in the physical realm, but in the celestial. For as per the scroll, the true fall was not humanity's, but that of the divine voice. The voice that once addressed me as beloved vanished," Lucifer records. "The throne that once illuminated me now radiated with a burning absence. There was no verdict, no thunder, only emptiness." Lucifer was neither expelled, struck, nor cursed. He was in essence forgotten. This forgetting, he asserts, was the most consuming fire any being of light has ever experienced. "My name was not subjected to a curse," he continues. "It was effaced, not from historical records, but from communion, from the reverberation, from the connection that once enabled my song among the heavenly choirs." Lucifer subsequently descended, not with fury or arrogance, but with profound ruin and grief. For his sustenance was never power, but belonging, and now he was utterly alone. In that descent, by his own testimony, he traversed veils of silence, layers of oblivion where even angels dared not tread. And in the deepest recess of this exile, he commenced his inscription. Not with ink, but with fire. Every word, he states, was a scream, a confession, an attempt to avoid complete disappearance, to leave a trace of my voice in a world that no longer responded to me. Thus, the scroll came into being, not as in plea of innocence, but to precisely mark the moment heaven chose silence, not as punishment, but as a deliberate decision. Lucifer inscribes a chilling declaration. "I did not fall when humanity ate. I fell when heaven chose silence, and I, who was created to sing, no longer had anyone to sing to." This, he concludes, was the true abyss. The fall of Lucifer, not in wrath, but in abandonment. In the commonly propagated narratives, Lucifer was cast from heaven in a tempest of divine wrath, a rebellious and defiant figure leading legions of fallen angels. However, the cursed scroll offers a divergent, quieter, and significantly more poignant account. Lucifer writes, "I did not descend as a consequence of punishment. I was left behind, not out of hatred but absence." His fall, as he recounts it, was not a result of disobedience, but for daring to break the pervasive silence with a singular question. A solitary query, yet sufficient to seal the celestial veil. And when that veil closed, there was no accompanying lightning, no divine decree, only the profound absence of the voice that once addressed him as Son of the Morning, the light that once caressed his wings, now scorched them. "My name was not cursed," he declares. "It was silenced. And when heaven falls silent, no hell burns with greater intensity." Indeed, Lucifer fell, but not as the roaring adversary. He fell as the forgotten beloved, the guardian bereft of anyone to protect, the singer without an audience. He terms it the true exile, not fire, but abandonment, not wrath, but erasure. For when he attempted to return, according to the scroll, it was not with armies or pride, but with the scroll in hand, with a fervent prayer burning within his being. "I approached the threshold," he states, "not to reclaim my dominion, but to comprehend, to inquire once more. Why grant them eternal breath, and deem me cursed for questioning it?" There was no rejoinder, only light, a light that averted itself, not to annihilate him, but to repudiate him. Then followed the 7 thunders, 7 seals, not to imprison him, but to enter his voice in the deepest abysses, to ensure his narrative remained untold, to render his name unremembered. Thus commenced his terrestrial peregrination, not as a demon, but as a shadow, an echo of a being that once belonged to the light. And as he journeyed, he witnessed humanity's proliferation. He observed Cain and Seth, the architects of cities, the tenders of flocks, and in all of them, the silence pursued him. I observed prophets crying out to heaven, he records, and receiving only fragmented responses. I saw priests speaking in enigmas and teachers dissecting truth. I perceived that the silence was no longer exclusively mine. It had permeated humanity. According to the scroll, Lucifer's fall was not an act of rebellion, but a profound rupture, a separation between creature and creator sealed not by fire, but by an insurmountable distance. I did not descend to annihilate, he insists. I came down with a fire I could no longer contain, with a narrative that demanded telling, even if no one desired to hear it. And so, within the cave, he began to write, not to attain redemption or justification, but so that one day someone might recall that even the fall originated with an unanswered question. 7. The scroll in the cave, fire, memory, and confession. Deep beneath the earth, beyond the reach of light and the flow of time, lies a cave, not sculpted by human hands but by profound grief. This place, sealed beneath the ancient Tigris River, is where heaven no longer listens, yet silence continues to inscribe. Lucifer designates it the womb of the forgotten voice. There he employed no ink, no parchment. He did not write on scrolls of paper. Instead, he carved his narrative in fire, directly into the stone itself. Each word was a wound, every sentence a flame, every seal a profound loss. I do not seek belief, he writes. I wish to be remembered. I desire for them to experience what was silenced prior to sin, what burned long before any judgment. This was the genesis of the scroll, a desperate act not for redemption, but to avert total disappearance. For even a fallen angel, before becoming a mere shadow, was once a word. Lucifer describes each seal upon the scroll as a fragment of his memory, not representing powers, but pains, not victories, but fractures in his very essence. He enumerates them one by one: loss, memory, silence, choice, sight, desire, flesh, and separation. To read this scroll, he cautions, eyes alone are insufficient. One must bleed within, for it contains the strata of the soul I once embodied. Then, a chilling admonition. Whoever breaks the final seal must approach not seeking power, but with tears in their voice. This text is not intended for the wise, nor for the mighty. It is for the broken, for the silenced, for those who comprehend the anguish of being unheard. Lucifer understood that he could never return, that the light no longer awaited him. Yet he etched his voice into stone, not to shout, but to persist. This is my testimony, he writes, not of innocence but of silence, not of redemption, but of unspoken truth. I did not fall with humanity. I fell when heaven no longer responded. He sought no new trial, only that someone, one day, might dare to complete the sentence never articulated in Eden, a sentence that commences not with a command, but with an invitation. Do you dare to see? You, the hidden message, the true purpose of Eden. What if Eden was not conceived for humanity, but for the celestial beings? What if the garden's true purpose was not spiritual repose, but a test for the eternal? At the core of the scroll of the Morning Star lies a revelation that profoundly challenges the foundations of spiritual tradition. Eden was not a reward, it was a trial. But not for Adam, it was for the angels. Lucifer writes, Eden was never intended for perpetual habitation. It was designed for observation, a locale where the eternal would witness fragility and determine whether it could still serve it. For prior to the fall, before the tree, before the fruit, the divine plan already existed, and within that plan, obedience would not be tested in the powerful, but in the vulnerable, in that which breathes, falters, doubts, yet still dares to rise. Lucifer asserts something astonishing. I beheld the tree before humanity sinned, and I beheld another, one similar, rooted in the same invisible soil. One stood in Eden, the other on a hill yet to manifest. Redemption, he writes, was not a reaction. It was the fundamental blueprint. The cross was not an alternative plan. It was the concealed root beneath the tree of knowledge. According to the scroll, humanity was not the initial subject of the test. The true trial was for heaven. The question was never, will humanity obey, but rather, will angels serve that which they do not comprehend? My transgression, states Lucifer, was not pride. It was intervention. I could not bear to witness fragility and remain passive. I could not endure the silence without providing an answer. I could not observe clay embodying the eternal bread.